and welcome to Council Wrap. I'm Wes Decker, and I'm joined this evening by Chief Paul Kifer of the Hagerstown Police Department. Also, I've got Sergeant Ed Plummer with me, and we've got the Community Liaison Coordinator in Ashley Rousch. Welcome, and there was a lot of discussion during the meeting about what once was called the Anti-Camping Ordinance. First of all, that title has been changed. So I guess my first question is, what was the thinking on changing that from the Anti-Camping Ordinance to what was discussed tonight, which was the Prohibited Lodging Out of Doors Ordinance?
I'm going to let Sergeant Plummer address that.
So when we originally set this up, we were kind of going off of what the wording was from different areas of the country. And then when we brought it to Chief, and Chief was reviewing it, he said, so camping can paint all kinds of pictures. We don't want people to think that camping is we're against the recreational sport of camping or the recreational hobby of camping, but the actual wording of prohibited lodging out of doors kind of explains it. It makes it more clear what we are lodging the ordinance for.
And since the last time that this had been discussed with mayor and council, what has happened since then? Can you kind of take me through where we've been and how we got here this evening with what was presented?
Yeah, we took that constructive conversation from the meeting in December.
Mm-hmm.
We went back and literally watched the council meeting again, so we didn't miss any of the comments or questions that each council member had, and tried to look at the ordinance as we had it originally drafted to see where we might have had some shortfalls, and we wanted to meet the needs that they were seeking. And with that, staff, other staff that's not here, at the table with us tonight, got together and really started to look at it from a standpoint of let's pare it down to a real basic ordinance instead of adding in all this other stuff, which makes it really confusing and can make it confusing. So staff did a great job. They found there's already an ordinance that covers property that the city has on the books. We reviewed our policies to see where any of our policies would meet the needs of the council members that they had. We had all that available to us tonight if they wanted to see that and needed it. I don't think that came up tonight. But we really went back and took a real hard look at what their needs were to see where we wanted to do this. So we put together our heads and kind of came back with where we were today. So it was really looking at that give and take, trying to figure out where they want to be, to see if we can get something across the finish line that meets the needs of the community and helps us do what we need to do.
Ashley, I'll get to you in just a moment. Let me go back to Sergeant Plummer just real quick, though. Sum up what the gist of this is. What is this attempting to accomplish? Because it seems like this particular topic brings a lot of emotions to the fore, depending upon who it is, who's reacting to it, and what they're hearing. But truly, what is this attempting to do?
Protect the public from every aspect. If you have people who are lodging out of doors, like I said during the meeting, they are in a vulnerable state. If you are asleep and not aware of where your surroundings, things can happen. Those crimes of opportunity can arise, but it also leaves the ability to preserve the areas in the city that are designed for individuals to enjoy, to not be monopolized by one person. So it kind of creates an overall, it's got aspects for every side to kind of just help protect everybody involved. It's the sanctity of the city, and this is just one more tool for the officers to use as they go through. I mean, it's not going to be the end-all be-all. It's not going to be the answer. It's not going to be the solution, but it's going to be one more tool to help us kind of move through our goal of serving the citizens. And that doesn't always look pretty, but the aspects you have to keep in mind are, again, the different crimes. When I was in patrol, I was keeping track of some of those crimes of opportunity. I know for one, a lady who was lodging out of doors had her purse stolen. And had she been behind closed doors, if she had been someplace where her belongings were secure, she would still probably have her purse.
And the reason that HPD would like to have this tool in their arsenal, so to speak, is because right now there are loopholes that seemingly can be found where there's absolutely nothing that can be done depending upon what the situation might be. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, I would absolutely, I'm sure the chief would agree. We did not, when we had a camping situation in the shadow of the police department, it's not something we want. You know, we wanted that to be, you know, the area needed to be available for everybody to use, and it wasn't. There's nothing we could do. And people were saying, this is happening 100 yards from your front door, and there's nothing you can do. There wasn't anything we could do. They had every vantage point of the law taken care of, and it was one anchor person who was there, and people were coming to hang out. People were coming there to party. People were doing, but they were abiding by the law by not blocking free passage. That's one law that we have in our toolbox.
So by the letter of the law.
Correct. And so by the letter of the law, they weren't,
Yeah.
there was still free passage. People could get around without causing, the definition of that law is to prevent, for people to have safe passage. So if you are blocking free passage and I have to step out into the roadway to get around that, I've now put myself in danger. So both people are supposed to be able to utilize that space. In this instance, people were utilizing that space and camping, but they left a space open. So we had for, I want to say it was 2 months, or there was nothing we could do. We tried. We went over, we talked to them, we offered them services, we did everything we could. And I know from one of those instances, a lady who would come there to she was just there hanging out. She actually wasn't part of that camp. She had come by to hang out. She fell asleep and passed away right there on the sidewalk while it happened. So like, it's one more preventative measure for us to try to mitigate any issues in the city.
And in that situation, we had a young lady that her worldly possessions were in a shopping cart. And the barrier was that she couldn't go get services because she'd have to leave her shopping cart outside on the sidewalk while she go into social services or other organizations. And because of that, her stuff would be stolen. So therefore, she didn't go get services. So we worked as a community of the police officers to help her and get that out. We brought in the community partners and had them, that was the first time that our community partners came out of their offices and came onto the site and went to where this person needed the help and worked on that. So it took us months, but we finally got her the help she needed. And once that happened, then that problem dissipated. But then we knew that it was potential for it to happen again, so we had to look at long-term solutions. And that's where the artwork that went up there that we had Public Works and Engineering do, that was done so that it's a crime prevention through environmental design.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but we had to create those issues because we were taking call after call after call, and people were just dumbfounded why we couldn't do something.
Yeah.
Why would you allow that to happen?
Yeah, and
it wasn't a crime. It wasn't a crime.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you know, all of you deal with so much within the city of Hagerstown, because you talked about it just about as it relates to every topic within the city, and that's the perception and misperceptions. And all of a sudden, when you have something like this, you know, Sergeant, right in the shadow of, you know, police headquarters, and you can't do anything about it, how does that make the police look? I mean, you've got no ability to do anything about something that's right there, and obviously you see it.
And how do you think that the
getting
men and
calls about
women that come to work every day feel
Right.
that their community feels about them
Yeah.
when they know they can't do anything, but yet they get that feeling
Yeah.
that the public doesn't think that they're doing anything. So
Right.
by doing this ordinance, as I mentioned earlier, it's to reduce that frustration level. It's to give us a tool when it's necessary.
Right.
And allow us to address a situation when that necessitates, when other laws or abilities aren't present.
Yes.
So
Actually, how long have you been with the city now?
Altogether, roughly 10 years with a little break in between.
Okay,
But
good, good, because this is what I want to get to. I want to hear your perspective on this, because you're out there on the streets, you're dealing with the homeless population on a regular
Yeah.
basis. So, you know, part of the discussion during the meeting, and I think Chief in particular brought this up, is that, you know, attitudes, so to speak, of the homeless population have changed. And I know that's in conjunction with what's happened within the country itself in large part. But what have your experiences been like? What changes have you seen over the course of those 10 years?
I think the chief and I could talk about this. I mean, when I first started, I worked a lot with youth and reentry and those individuals that were getting out of prison. And it's crazy till after 10 years, we've watched the folks that we were working with that were being recently released from the prison system go from dealers to users, some of them dying. I've watched guys that I worked with very early on in my career pass away from overdose, who used to deal and also experience homelessness. So it's not, it affects everyone. I've run the gamut. We talk about the reentry population. We talk about, those dealing with substance abuse. We talk about mental health. Like it affects everyone. It really does. Like Councilwoman Burnett said, we are all just a job loss away, something, away from being homeless.
Right.
And so I've seen it. I've seen everything. I've seen it, and I think any community partner that you talk to that does this work could tell you stories too, that we've all seen it. And it really does affect everyone. And I do think that, I think, again, Councilwoman Burnett hit it on the head. We need to do better as a community, as a county, as a whole.
And how about the level of combativeness? Have you personally seen that rise?
Yeah, and I wonder, combativeness has risen, our political environment has changed, the society that we live in has changed. But also I just think that, right now, and not just politically, but I feel like people just lose hope. If you're in these situations, there's just, you lose hope and you lose that ability to just have that.
Yeah.
And I always say that's one thing, that if you lose, it's just what is life without hope.
Right. And it seems as though, like losing hope leads to desperation.
Yeah.
And then people feel as though they have nothing to lose.
Yeah. And I think there are those of us that have voices, and certainly people at this table and other tables that have positions that can enact change that would make a difference in the lives of those that are experiencing hopelessness. And I think we have to do a better job. And as Sergeant Plummer said, part of the law is protecting those vulnerable individuals. Right. There's a lot of other barriers and things we need to do to protect vulnerable populations that, quite honestly, we as a community aren't doing a very good job of. Even at the state level, I think we could be doing more. I really do. And I think that we need to be looking into those avenues as well.
But as the chief said, this ordinance would not be criminalizing homelessness. That is not the goal of the ordinance. So what does it say to you, Chief, that the Homeless Coalition, I'm not going to say, endorse this, but is certainly okay with this approach?
Well, I think twofold. I think they're experiencing the same change in society as the rest of us. They have concerns. Their staff has concerns. The antagonistic attitude of our population, when you bring that down into people with substance abuse issues or mental health issues, just balloons a lot bigger, right? And so I think that's one of the things. But I also truly believe that they trust us. They trust the police department here. They know how we work. We've been working with them on a non-enforcement approach. We are involved way more than most police departments are in those social issues and problem solving. We're in meetings that has nothing to do with law enforcement, but because we touch these people, we can provide suggestions and ideas, and then ways that we can help those agencies through resource gathering, through data, through whatever we can do that helps that problem solving approach. So I think we put a lot of deposits into this community to show that we are not only just empathetic and sympathetic, but we also aren't empowering people to do wrong. And that's what this ordinance is there for too, is we want to help, but at the same time, hold accountable. Because I think it has to be both. And I think sometimes we lose that. Sometimes we go one way to the other. We either want to be, everyone gets locked up, and that's the answer that a lot of people in our society think is the answer, which doesn't work. We've tried that since the 80s on drugs, and it didn't work, and we still have drugs around here.
Yeah.
The other side is we shouldn't lock anybody up, and that's what we're seeing a lot from the state legislation that's come out, is that we're giving everybody an excuse not to be held accountable. And I think we, as an agency, and I'm real proud of my staff, I'm real proud of how we approach things, we try to find that middle ground. We want to help you, but we also want to hold you accountable. And I think that's what this ordinance really is about doing, is giving you, the person I come across, the ability to voluntarily comply. You trying to throw that in my face, saying that I don't have to listen to the rules. Those rules don't apply to me. I'm going to do what I want to do, and you can't do anything about it. Now this ordinance will give us the ability to say, I think you're wrong, sir. Here's what we're going to do. And then you have to go see a judge. And hopefully that judge is going to then impose the things that we try to get you the help on, which then hopefully rings a bell with you that maybe starts you down the path of getting you back into a more stable lifestyle.
Right.
That doesn't have you on the street, doesn't put you in harm's way, living on the street where bad things can happen to you, because you're sleeping. So I think that's where we are with this.
And I want to make it very clear, if we are, and again, not even just with the homelessness, but if we're on the street with someone experiencing any kind of difficulty, especially in that social service realm, and they want assistance, we don't leave them. We make sure, and that is where our community partners are wonderful at stepping in and helping. There has never been a situation where someone is out with one of our officers and says, hey, I need to go to treatment today, I need this today, and we turn them away. The guys are dealing with it themselves. They're calling me. We're essentially case managing people, calling those organizations, and we're making sure they get the help that they need when they are ready.
Right.
So Wes, we are essentially law enforcement, at least here. I'm going to speak just about our police department. We're a social service agency. That's what we are. Majority of what we deal with is social service issues, not criminal issues, not in a true sense.
And you are the ones who are first to that scene.
And we are always on the scene.
Yes.
But here's the difference between us being a social service agency and others. We never close, and we can never tell you we can't help you, because we have to solve a problem right then and there. What is that solution we got to come up with? Other agencies, nothing, no dig, but they work 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever that is, and they're off on the weekends, 24/7. We are a social service agency. Ashley's coming in on her time
And you
off to
go to
help.
them, and that's the other thing.
And we go to them.
You go to them. It's not.
They're not coming to our
Instagram.
building. They're not coming to us. We are meeting them where they are in their moment.
Yep.
And that's what law enforcement really has turned into be in a large part. So we have to find solutions that are not arrestable solutions. But we still need, in these circumstances, under like this ordinance, those opportunities where we have those situations where that frustration level is there, where we're getting those calls and there's nothing we can do under the current ordinances and laws that we have to solve that problem, and to at least immediately solve that problem, and then hopefully work on those solutions. Even if we arrest someone under this ordinance, they are still going to be offered assistance, because that arrest is going to be through a citation.
Right.
Typically, you're going to get a ticket right on the spot, and then we're still going to say, now, you got the ticket, let us help you. Let us get you where you're going to go. Let's work on this now, so that when you go to court, you can say, I've already started working on my solution, which is only going to be beneficial for you in front of a judge anyway. So those things happen anyway, and that's what we're going to continue to do. I brought up Officer Ortiz earlier, that Sergeant Plummer brought up, the comment that we got from the gentleman. He's a prime example of what the men and women here at the police department do. This is the compassion and empathy that they put out to these individuals that we come across, no matter what their circumstances are.
Yeah.
And that happens more often than not. So this isn't going to change that.
Right. And there seemed to be, Sergeant, some uneasiness and perhaps even some pushback from members of council, but in the end, came to what you might call a bit of a compromise with, obviously you had at least one council member who was certainly in favor of this without a doubt. You had some others with some reservations and some questions, and so we're going to get to a period where it's going to be like a test period, I guess, with this sunsetting of the ordinance. So what was your overall takeaway from what was decided by council here this afternoon?
I mean, life is all about compromises. So the fact that as Chief said, fact that they trust us enough to try it, especially when, you know, it originally seemed like a majority may have been opposed to it. We came back tonight, we talked through it, we addressed their concerns. Just like Chief said, we went back and we watched the game tape. So we adjusted and we came back and we presented, addressing, because every single one of those concerns were valid and they made points, and we wanted to make sure that we understood all their points. So we went back and we addressed it, and I believe that the compromise is a fair one. And I think it does give our officers a chance to show that this will be a tool that could be beneficial to the city. Nowhere in that ordinance is the word homeless ever mentioned. There are there's a spectrum of reasons why you may be lodging outdoors.
Sure.
You may not be.
That's a good point.
Everybody keeps bringing up homeless. Nowhere in there is the word homeless. There's a whole spectrum of reasons, Ashley, that people would be lodging outdoors, correct? Mm-hmm. You encounter it every day, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, that putting that tag on it isn't fair to the tool that we're trying to use either.
Okay. Yeah, it's narrowing the scope way too much in terms of those who might be the offenders, so to speak. So what are some of the other reasons that people might be lodging outdoors? I mean, what have you experienced?
You know, you run the gamut. We have folks that, you know, maybe they just had too much fun at Meredith Park, and you know, on their way home,
So something very temporary.
Yes, and it could happen, you know, honestly to anyone. And again, an officer is going to go to that person, and they're going to wake them up and, you know, tell them to move along. And it's a very rare instance where this ordinance would even go into effect, things like that. But we do come across, you know, instances like that. But we have a lot of folks that stay with friends and they get kicked out in the middle of the night and they have nowhere to go.
Okay.
You know, our cold weather shelter is closing here in April, so that will have another gamut of issues. But a lot of times when we're dealing with people in the middle of the night and early in the morning, we're coming across folks that maybe weren't homeless. It's a lot of times if they get kicked out in the middle of the night. Unfortunately, we have some like young adults, that 18 to 24-year-olds, that happens to them a lot too.
Okay.
Especially when they're sleeping in their cars, things like that.
Right.
And usually that's a very temporary, figure it out the next day with mom kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't usually turn into anything.
So
But we also, and
No,
I'm
go
going to
ahead,
bring
Chief.
up, I'm going to take advantage of the opportunity to bring this up. We also have some facilities that are here in the city that their business model causes issues here. There are people that come here from other jurisdictions for treatment, assistance, and those business models of those few agencies that we could identify, and I'm not going to do it here, but those agencies will throw people out on the street for a variety of different reasons from that treatment facility with no home plan, no issue, and they're left to their own devices. And it may be temporary. It may be they're only out on the street for a day or two here because they're trying to get their way back home.
But
or
they're
get to
still
someplace
there
else.
and someone sees
So
them
technically, are they
and
homeless?
says-
Technically,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but they're here for another reason, and we've got some of those issues that are going, that we're also working to try to address and see if we can resolve, that are a completely different model from the homeless, that what people envision of homelessness. But those are issues that are happening here too, and so we're in the gamut of trying to come up with ideas and solutions on a lot of this, and some things we can do as a government, some things we can't.
Right.
And that's why I encouraged, you know, mayor and council and everyone to get involved. You know, we proposed this ordinance, you know, a couple of months ago, and that's ample time for folks to come in during citizen comment and let us know their feedback. You know, this is a city ordinance. It affects all of us. So we have Neighborhoods First meetings. I tell everyone, if you watch council meetings, they're streamed for a reason. Give feedback. If you can't come in and give citizen comment, you can email Donna, let her know, and she will make sure your comments get heard. We want everyone to have a voice and to be a part of this, especially when we're going through a process like this.
And one of the things that I heard from the council members was, and I think that's why it's part of the reason that this is so difficult, is because they kept mentioning data. But can you truly quantify this? I mean, I think that's very difficult to do, because you've already determined that this would be a helpful tool in your tool belt. So I mean, I feel like that is to present something that is tangible and concrete isn't really that easy.
It's not, because we can capture certain type of data because we have contact. That data we can capture and we can ask those questions and we can get that. But as we talked about after we went out into the other room, if we enact this ordinance and we got 6 months to see how it's going to impact, we could make an arrest on Wes Decker, 2 months into it.
Well, let's hope.
And that charge could be put in place. By the time we come back in 6 months, you may not have even gone to court yet. So we may not have answers for some of those to how it's going to impact them from a court standpoint. However, we can track how many contacts we're having. We can set up the ability to do that. We can see what the voluntary compliance is. I know they're looking at ages and the, gender and things like that. We can capture all that data, from our standpoint. But again, not everybody we're going to be bringing in here with the data is going to be homeless. Not everybody's going to, it's going to be the contacts that address the behavior we're talking about. So that number is going to be the behavior that we see, not the fact that everyone's just homeless.
Right.
And so not everybody's going to give us a direct answer if they're homeless or not. So
also
we have to,
super
some of that
difficult.
we have to take their word for it.
Yeah, it's also super difficult because it's not always a crime. So a great example, I had a call from an officer one evening who asked me, because we do a homeward bound program, so if folks are here, they're displaced for whatever reason, and they have found themselves homeless or unhoused, we can try to work with them on getting them home, especially in instances that the chief mentioned where maybe they're here for treatment, but they want to go back. I had an officer call me one night because someone came here for like a date. Like they met someone online, they decided to take the plunge and come to Hagerstown, and then they ended up having no money and no date. And then they were just stuck here. And of
that's a
course,
bad
that
night.
person had a home. We've had, people bike. I've had a gentleman come to me and he biked from New York to Hagerstown, and then I think his bike got, just the things that you hear and the way people get displaced. And again, we've all been through hard times and we try to help the best that we can.
Right.
But there are more than just what I think people think are traditional homeless. Like circumstances happen, things happen to people. We try our very best to assist when we can, but.
Right.
And what I think people in the community watching tonight or thinking this is addressing is what they truly see as a homeless situation. Someone sleeping under an overpass with blankets all over them. The image that you see on TV that, there's a tent and there's people sitting around a little camp, along the side of the road. That we don't get much.
Right.
We don't get that much here, not, in public places.
Yeah.
And we've been pretty good at addressing that. Even
Yeah.
before the Supreme Court changed that, we were able to address a lot of that. But the population of what people see now as homeless, as I said earlier, a lot of them are not homeless. They're just not homeless. They live on the street without sleeping on the street. So and they appear to be homeless because they have that appearance to them that everyone generalizes. And I get it. I understand. You look at that, and
Right.
It's the implicit bias that people apply to other individuals that we all have. And that's where I think that's at. But that frustration level of our communities has come out. But we have legitimate issues of downtown business owners and other businesses outside of just downtown.
Right.
That when they come to work, there's people sleeping, urinating, defecating along their properties that they have to deal with. And that is not fair to them, especially if it's on public property that they're doing this and we don't have a recourse for it.
Right.
If it's on their personal property and it's happening, then they have the trespassing issues that they can deal with, and we can still deal with that from a legal standpoint. But once they're on the public property and doing that, then those sometimes are just those cracks that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if we can't say, Wes, you were here this morning and I told you to leave, and you keep coming back every morning, then this ordinance can be that step to say, okay, you're just not getting this, so we're going to charge you with
And so when we
that.
talk about data, those instances where an officer might say to move along, or those instances where I'm getting called about the gentleman whose bike was stolen or the one that lost his, catfish love, those kinds of things, there's no crime attached to them, so there's no report generated. It's not it's not easily tracked.
Yeah.
So it is going to be a learning curve, I think, to track, and we'll have to hash that out with mayor and council about really what they want, and maybe get a new records management system.
We'll have to change
at
how we're
some
doing
point.
things with the guys to see what we can track the data.
And,
so.
and that goes back to what Sergeant Plummer said during the meeting, and certainly you echoed that, the amount of time that's spent on these calls.
Yeah.
that just adds up when you get them again and again and again, no matter how much time it takes to attempt to resolve. The fact is, you're going out to answer these each and every time.
As I said, being a social service agency, and I
Right,
declare
yep,
that because the study, the rudimentary study we did, and I want to make that very clear, it wasn't a complete in-depth study,
Right.
was to take 6 months worth of data and attach the man hours that it took to address those issues for 6 months. And in 6 months, we spent 8 years of man hours
Wow.
to address 6 months worth of social service, social issues.
That's a staggering figure.
Social
right there.
issues that we were able to track based on the data that we
Yeah.
had. That doesn't include the stuff that we kind of just
That's just the
mentioned.
calls for service we're talking about. The typical, we identified
Right.
certain types of calls for service that we associate to social issues.
Yeah.
Not all of those would be, but we lumped that in. That's why I say it was not in-depth.
Yeah.
But with that, we're close. So 8 years worth of man hours to address 6 months worth of types of calls. That tells you what we do and how we're trying to do things. This is a really super small portion of this for just those
Yeah.
ones that kind of fall into the cracks of the ability for us to deal with them from a legal standpoint.
Right.
Without standing there going, well, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, yeah, but when you mention something like 8 years of man hours for 6 months of real time, I mean, that gives you an indication of how important something like this could potentially be as that tool in the tool belt that you don't have now. So I think that really puts it into perspective.
It takes a lot of tools to build a house. We can't build this house without having a lot of tools. If we didn't, the house wouldn't be sound. It wouldn't be a structure that everybody would be proud of. So, I mean, with all these tools, we can build a better society.
Yeah, very,
And,
very
I'm
fair
going to use
analogy.
I'm gonna use an analogy that he brought up in the other room, and I'm going to bring it up because I think it's appropriate now. When you talk about tools, we carry a lot of tools in our tool belt. We carry pepper spray and tasers and a gun and those other things, and we rarely use any of them. And the reason why it's there is when you need to use it.
Yes.
And this ordinance is the same thing. When you need to use it.
It's that last
available.
resort.
It's available to
Yeah.
use when you need to use
That's
it.
right. Yeah.
So that's somewhat of an analogy which he brought up in there, which I thought was appropriate.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing, and I have a lot of respect for them to have to make that decision up here, because they're the ones
Yeah.
going to get the emails and the phone calls and all the stuff that comes into them. And I get that. Trust me, I get that. That's why I think this was a great compromise tonight that Councilwoman Anderson come up with, because I think it gives the ability to show that this isn't the big scary monster that everybody thinks that it is. Just like our crime-free housing program that we put in place back in 2011-ish. The big concern was this was going to be, well, we're just going to be charging property owners and gathering all these fees and doing all that. And it was the farthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
It did exactly what we wanted to do. It got everyone to be compliant. It got everyone to try to be better ambassadors of the properties that they owned. And it made our community better,
Yeah.
because there was that holding of this over their head kind of thing.
Just
So
a
if
little
you
bit of
don't, you
accountability
can-
that
Yep.
made everyone
Yeah.
feel safer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that became a non-issue. And
Yeah.
I honestly believe this is going to be a non-issue as well.
Right, and I think oftentimes there's so much discussion ahead of time because there is a little bit of fear because something like this hasn't been done before, here at least.
Right.
And it's like, well, because it worked there, we're not the same here. And we say that all the time, and that's true. So the only way to figure it out is to implement it, and as you said, probably a pretty good compromise made by the body here. And
I thought
we'll
it was
see how it
brilliant.
goes
I thought it was brilliant.
over the next 6 months. So hopefully it's, good for everyone, and at the end of 6 months, have some, good information to report, and this, potentially becomes something that would be permanent, and as you said, Sergeant, that tool in the tool belt that right now is missing. So I thank all of you for your time here this evening. We talked about this so much. Again, time for implementation to take place, which will be happening over the next 6 months or so. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you to all of you for watching and for being interested, and look forward to seeing you next time. For now, that's a wrap.